Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Ashwin Agaraman. I'm a solutions architect supporting Riot Games as a customer of AWS. Welcome to CMP311, the future of sport. Hopefully you guys are all in the right room. Let's get this started. So, actually, before we get started, I wanted to give you a quick agenda. Two of Riot's principal engineers are here to talk to you guys about Riot's journey from remote broadcast to centralized production. And along the way, we're going to take a deep dive into some of the networking technologies that underlay the whole thing. So to get started, Riot's mission is to aspire to be the most player-focused games company in the world. And they use the word aspire for a very particular reason, so that they're never done. Riot Games is always trying to innovate on behalf of their fans and their players, and the word aspire means that they're never going to be done in that journey. It's actually very similar to AWS's customer obsession principle. So in the name of customer obsession and player focus, AWS and Riot Games have started a pretty awesome partnership in order to kind of pave the way for the next 10 years of Riot esports. So before we really get started, if you guys aren't familiar with Riot Games, here's a quick peek.
We are changing the game forever.
That's a little taste of what we get up to at Riot in the esports world. It's pretty hype. I know for many of us, if we're ever having a bit of a down day, we just pop that on and it gets us pretty amped. So, hi everyone. I'm James. I'm a infrastructure engineer on Riot's esports team, and as Ashwin said, we're here to kind of talk through some of what we're up to in Riot's esports. Firstly, thanks to the AV crew. That was pretty cool to get the audio pumping there. So appreciate that. So Ashwin mentioned Riot's mission, and Riot Esports have our own mission as well in service of that. And our mission is bringing joy to billions of esport fans, no matter where they live, how they watch, or what language they speak. And billions is not a typo. We're truly aspiring for greatness here. Our fans join us on that journey, and we have to set audacious goals just so that we can match expectations sometimes. So it's pretty important. So that's what we do in esports. So how are we redefining esports? Obviously, that's kind of the topic of the talk here today. And the key things that we're going to call out as we go through this is, the productions that our technology teams service, they're always looking for new ways to surprise and delight our fans. They're looking for new technologies. This Dragon, I think, was 5 or 6 years ago now that we did in China, and that was broadcast in real time around the world. So we're always looking for different ways to bring this together, and that puts a lot of challenge to the technical teams to be able to keep up and deliver these experiences. And so having a partner like Amazon in this process is one where we can look to them as well to leverage some of the latest and greatest technologies as they come out. Things like alternate reality, mixed reality. These are areas we're continually exploring and trying to bring to our fans in the best way possible. So just rewinding a little bit, the first thing I want to do is just set some expectation on like what is broadcast and how does it work? How many people in the room are actually in the broadcast or esports industry? Are there many around? No hands. Amazing. All right. So for those of you that don't know broadcast, this is a broadcast truck. And traditionally, when you're watching a traditional sport or even Riot's esports going back a few years, usually one of these is parked out the back of the stadium. And they're full of monitors, they're full of screens, they're full of big, heavy video appliances that are running bespoke chips for processing the tremendous amount of video signals that they do. It's all connected together with coax cables, usually, and that means that everything kind of has to be done on site. The production team that's actually responsible for driving that equipment goes on site, and that means that you have to bring a lot of TV producers, directors, operators of different systems, and they all sit in the truck. It's actually kind of cool. They expand sideways as they go. So it's fun. But that presents a problem for Riot because when we do our shows, we actually go all around the world, which means whenever we pick a new country for our events, we have to go and find trucks there, and we have to set them up from scratch every time we do a show. And at the end of the day, you've got your production operations team are sitting inside a dark room looking at a wall of monitors. And so the concept of remote production is really to take that question of, if they're going to sit in a dark room looking at a wall of monitors, why do they have to be there? Why do they have to be on site in a broadcast truck? And so that's where Riot has been working. There's a number of other companies in the world that do this. It's not exactly a new technology, but it's certainly one where the broadcast industry is kind of at the peak of its innovation at the moment. And so just to recap what's going on inside one of these, what we're doing is we're aggregating a number of raw sources that come together to create an esports broadcast. Cameras, for players, for casters, for hosts, for analysts, microphones, all of the audio sources, game spectators in esports. That's a very big thing. Where in traditional sports, you might be filming the field. In esports, you've actually got PCs that output a broadcastable view of the game that's in progress. We have to capture all of those signals and bring them into these broadcast appliances like video switches, audio mixers, and live replay appliances. And that's really where the kind of the crux of the technical challenge of a broadcast sits. On the other side of that, you're broadcasting multiple versions of the same content out for different purposes. If you're broadcasting just one language, it's pretty easy. You just throw the output of the switcher out to the world with the language applied. But for Riot's broadcasts, we actually go in over 20 languages around the world when we service esports. And that's because our fans are everywhere. It's not good enough for us to just simply transmit in one language, because that doesn't service all our fans around the world. So we might have the opportunity for multiple partner studios to take what's called a clean feed of our broadcast and transmit that, add their own casters, add their own show on top of that. It's almost like a toolbox that they can then use to create a show for their fans. So this is what it kind of looks like when it comes together. This is a quick GIF. This was a few weeks ago at our World Championship Finals. It was in the Chase Center in San Francisco. We sold it out. It was the heaviest rig that ever hung from the arena. And you can see this is a footage of the game announcers calling the final moments of Game 5. It was an absolute ripper of a match. And the production feed up on the screens behind, showing some of these elements coming together. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about live esports. So let's have a look, just rewinding back a little bit and talk about a little bit more specifically about AWS and where Riot really kind of learned about how much we could leverage a partnership with AWS and move into the cloud. And this happened in 2020, actually, in March. You guys might recall what happened in March 2020. We all got locked out of our offices and sent home, which presented a problem for the operations teams that run live broadcasts, because they got stuck unable to access the equipment that drives the broadcast. The players couldn't come to the stage to play, so they had to go online. And the production teams couldn't get access to their equipment. And so Riot was kind of faced with a big challenge. How do we keep this going? our fans have this expectation that they're going to see their favorite teams play every week. And even more so now that they're all stuck at home. How do we actually deliver this to them? Our production teams, they all have jobs producing the content. If we stop producing the content, the jobs go away. And that's a big thing as well for us. And so there was a lot of drive within our tech teams. I know a lot of us get kind of quite emotional about this when we think of what we were able to do, to create a way for us to produce our esports without a dependency on our physical systems. No one allowed on site, the shows were already running, and we actually only had 11 days to figure it out. And so we started tackling the problem and actually looking at the inspiration of kind of like Twitch and YouTube streamers. They produce content from home all the time. Why can't we do that? Well, our shows are a little bit more complex than one person can handle. And so we had a couple of key objectives that we wanted to achieve as we approach this problem space, which is to try and remove some of the complexity of this broadcast from people's home. So we're not reliant on any one person's home internet connection, because they go out from time to time. Move the kind of key encoding and production workflows into the cloud, and also provide a way for our broadcast staff to actually access that remotely. And so this was kind of the first time that we really went full force into understanding that compute in the cloud is now getting to a point where you can actually do live video in it. Live video is a tremendous amount of data when it's running uncompressed, and that means that you actually need a lot of processing power. And so where 10 years ago, you really had to have bespoke equipment with custom chips, now this is moving into software. And so this is a shot of one of our early tests where we're starting to put those elements together using a remote desktop. I think I was sitting on my balcony at the time, and you can see a couple of game observers in there and some of the other members of the tech crew. This was done in Sydney, putting together the first kind of tests. And so this is a quick shot of the architecture. You're welcome to take a photo of it. Caveat, this is actually a 2-year-old diagram, and we've progressed from here, but it was a good starting point to say, hey, this is where we kind of launched our real integration for esports with Amazon. And so you can see 3 kind of key instances that we're using. 2 of them running Windows, running a software called vMix. And we were toying with the idea of trying to horizontally scale our broadcast within the cloud. Even with kind of condensing it as much as we couldn't quite make it all fit onto one instance. And so we had to figure out how do we transmit video between them and stuff like that. And so that was a kind of a cool way to kick things off. And yeah, 11 days later, we only kind of lost 1 day of broadcast. We were able to bring our casters back, and we were able to have them start to share their jokes, their personalities with fans. This is a screenshot of one of those shows coming back on. They're all from their bedroom, and esports kept rolling. And so that was something that we were really proud of. We absolutely couldn't have done it without being able to flexibly deploy infrastructure and just kind of turn things on and mess with it until it worked. And that was a big win for us. And a global collaboration as well between multiple different leagues and teams. 2020 continued on, and we had this commitment for a little event, which you saw a clip of before, called Worlds. That's obviously the pinnacle event for the year, and we didn't want to cancel that either. The problem was we'd set it up to be in China, and no one could travel. And so we were able to go through a lengthy process to get a lot of government permission to get some of our teams to China, but we had the bulk of our staff working remotely. So again, we had to turn to, well, how can we now take what was going to be a production kind of centered on site within China and distribute it across the world? And so we were able to leverage some of the technologies we learned about earlier as we brought our regular shows online and kind of build this global transmission pipeline that would send feeds all over the world. As I mentioned earlier, we're not the only people doing remote production, so this is not us trying to claim that this is kind of new or unique to Riot, but it is something that in 2020, I think many broadcasters, including ourselves, really got forced, our hands forced into that space, and a lot of innovation came out of it across the board. So for China Worlds 2020, we're transmitting 120 video and audio feeds out to the world, broadcasting in 19 different languages from studios spread across the globe. And we were able to do that and get the inclusion of 1,300 plus staff to co-produce the show. One little anecdote that I like here, I was helping with some of the infrastructure from Sydney at the time, and I was listening on the comms, watching the rehearsal for the opening ceremony. and we were watching a team of dancers on the stage that were rehearsing their workflow or rehearsing their routine. Workflow, I'm too techy. They were rehearsing their routine, and there was the actual main choreographer for the dance was in LA, and they were watching live and delivering feedback directly to the stage in China in between runs of the rehearsal, so that those dancers could actually improve and get the routine down. And so we were doing most of that work through just a few EC2 instances. The reliability of these for transmitting video around the world has actually proven to be really useful for us. And we were able to just simply pick and choose where we would deploy them to get the video feeds as close to our partners as we could. We wanted to, as our central kind of production team, make it easy for partners around the world to pick up broadcasts rather than trying to have 19 different regions solve the problem of how do I get video out of China to me. And so the result was a whole bunch of different broadcasts all around the world. As you can see here, it's not just the same show. It's not just a copy of the same exact content, but you have multiple unique shows. Each region gets those 120 unique video and audio sources and is able to create their own unique flavor for their fans. They can cover the teams that are from their region much more heavily because they're not kind of beholden to the central content that's being produced once out of the show. So looking a little bit forward now, the future for our esports looks like we're now in a world where we need to start to produce a lot more simultaneous events. We've got a lot of architecture that we've developed during COVID that we're trying to build a bit more resilience in, and a lot of innovative experiences that we still want to deliver to our fans. And one of the key points here is that Riot Esports is not just powered by Riot Esports. There is an incredible depth of technology expertise at Riot, upon which we are privileged enough to build our products and our toys that we play with. And one of those teams is a team called Riot Direct. Has anyone in the room heard of Riot Direct? Yeah, well, I know you guys have, come on. Okay, so Riot Direct is our internal ISP. This is probably the easiest way to put that. And we've actually got one of the engineers behind Riot Direct to kind of explain a little bit about what it is, why it exists, because it's super relevant to come back to in esports later in the talk. So please welcome Mauricio from Riot Direct to the stage.
Hello. My name is Mauricio. I'm an engineer on the Riot Direct team, as James mentioned. So before we talk about Riot Direct, let's understand what is the problem before that we had back when we were on the times of like broadcast trucks, like James mentioned. So as James mentioned, Riot operates esports across different regions and make esports roadshows in many different countries. That means that sorting out internet access to all those locations was incredibly challenging. Understanding how individual ISPs are connected and what is the quality of their connection to a few other key networks can be time-consuming and not always precise. During an event, gameplay traffic is always offline. So we take like local game servers. So in case we have any issue with like network connectivity, the gameplay integrity is maintained and we don't affect the competition. Broadcasting, on the other hand, has to be ingested to partners like Twitch and YouTube. And that all happens over the public internet. While broadcast traffic is not particularly latency sensitive, it is very sensitive to jitter and packet loss. Any issues we had with network connectivity while on the road was hard to troubleshoot. Is it the last mile? Is it the backbone transport? Is it the peering edge? Those are all questions that, like, while they are not the hardest engineering time problem to solve, they take time to reach to that conclusion. And when you have a live show with like tens of millions of people watching, you cannot afford that time. So we would have to open tickets, some with ISPs, sometimes with language barriers, and trying to convince a network operator that he has to engineer the paths towards Google or towards Amazon because you have a little bit of jitter against an endpoint. It's not a very easy sell, often unsuccessful as well. So if everything about connectivity fail on the venue, we used to have like a third path. So you can see on the picture that we have like a satellite transmission, and we used to have that in case everything went wrong with internet access. But it had two problems. One, it is extremely expensive. The other one, it is unidirectional. So it would mean we could send the broadcast signal from a venue to a regional studio that we know that the connectivity was okay, but we couldn't send content back to the venue. So that created a production gap. At the same time we had these issues, in 2014, the Riot infrastructure team was funding an initiative called Riot Direct. So what is Riot Direct? Riot Direct is Riot's own global network made to connect our player service providers directly to our game servers, which ensures that our game traffic gets the highest priority and most direct routing to our game servers. This network is built on standard service provider technologies like IP and MPLS. To optimize return traffic to our players, we traffic engineer paths to go against one of the default ways of forwarding traffic over the internet, called hot potato routing. So what is hot potato routing? Hot potato routing basically means I want to egress packets of my network at the closest exit point possible. This is very effective for things that are hosted on CDNs, Anycast services, but for unicast gaming services, it can mean that you are taking a congested path back to your player. With Riot Direct, since we operate and know the traffic profiles of our games, we can be sure that our network is not going to be congested. So at any moment that we have a player packet, we try to hold to that packet as long as we can. So let me give you an example. Think that you're a player playing in Los Angeles and you want to play in our servers in Chicago. We would receive that packet in our Los Angeles location as any other network, and we will forward it all the way to Chicago. Once the packet returns, if you are doing hot potato routing, you probably would egress that packet in Chicago. But in Riot Direct, since we want to hold to that packet, we will use our own internal backbone to forward all the way to Los Angeles and then deliver the packet back to the player. In such a way, we can avoid possible congestions in this path between Chicago and Los Angeles on third-party networks, and also a little bit of ineffective routing. Having multiple points of presence across the world also allowed us to improve our DDoS mitigation capabilities. We were able to anycast all of our prefixes, which means that it's really hard for an attacker to single out a location and target, let's say, Los Angeles specifically. Along with that, we use a bunch of market DDoS mitigation systems, and we have a few that we develop inside Riot ourselves that use a little bit more obscure techniques to mitigate DDoS traffic. So in 2014, we started identifying points of presence that internet service providers and carriers use to exchange traffic, and how these locations map back to our player locations. We then searched the most direct and fastest fiber paths between these locations to build our initial backbone. Latency requirements for a game like League can be incredibly low. A few milliseconds of latency can be the difference between success and failure, and also a lot of player frustration. So lowering player latency was the main focus. After carefully selecting these locations, we started working with ISPs and our own engineering team to make sure that player traffic was taking the appropriate routing inside our network and also into those ISP networks. One of the ways that we measure success at this, we were looking at player accounts that were playing under 80 milliseconds. When we first started the project, we had only 31% of our players playing under 80 milliseconds. After 9 months of investing just in peering and connectivity, we were able to raise that number to 50%. But this was not enough. We had a problem that our servers were located in Portland, which it doesn't matter how much fiber do you have, light only travels so fast, right? So by building this network, we had a strong network foundation to allow for other Riot infrastructure teams to be able to move servers of locations without having to worry about connectivity in itself. So later on that year, our data center team at Riot was able to move our servers from Portland to Chicago, and that added the last bit that we needed. We were able to overnight jump from 50% of our players to almost 85% of our players playing under 80 milliseconds. So nowadays, Riot Direct is present in almost 50 locations and connects to close to 90 internet exchange points. With that, we manage over 3,500 BGP sessions. So if you think about like number of internet exchanges in the world, Riot is between the 20 largest networks in terms of exchange point presence. This allows for Riot to deploy services for players globally with direct reachability to nearly all the largest ISPs in the world. The expansion of our network also allows us to launch one of our newest titles, Valorant. That is a first-player shooter that has even stricter latency targets. So we want to have most of our players playing under 35 milliseconds of latency, and it's incredibly challenging to do so. In this map, all the red pins are locations where Riot already has game servers running and providing connectivity to players to our global backbone. Since we use technologies that allow us to create overlay networks on top of our global backbone, we can basically provide multiple network topologies for different customers. And when we say customers, like League of Legends is a customer, Valorant is a different one, esports is a different one, and they are all using the same infrastructure, but using different networking paths as they need. We also provide connectivity from all these locations to different AWS regions and local zones, interconnecting all of them to our global backbone. Currently, we are connected to almost 20 different locations and have over 100 interfaces directly attached to our routers. It's an impressively big presence with AWS. This is a requirement for Riot's mission to be the most player-focused company in the world and going where our players are. If a developer or infrastructure owner wants to deploy a new VPC in AWS, the only thing they have to do is issue a direct connect request to our backbone team, and they will be able to access all the infrastructure at Riot that they want. Of course, as long as the security posture allows it. This is true for new data centers, offices, esports studios, or any infrastructure at Riot. So after building our global backbone, we were able to change how esports connect to our network. Now, instead of us procuring like individual internet access to those locations, we are basically procuring like point-to-points from the venues to different Riot Direct locations, and then we don't need to worry about like connectivity to the internet, because we do use that network for our game packets. We do use that network on our day-to-day, so we know very well the traffic profiles of our network. Also, this allows for esports studios to be able to exchange content as they want. We procure a lot of extra capacity because, as many of you might know, gaming companies are a pretty big target for DDoS attacks. So we have a lot of spare bandwidth, and we use that bandwidth to be able to efficiently move esports traffic around the world. Also, funny enough, when we think about gaming traffic and we think about broadcast traffic, they are incredibly similar. So game packets are basically UDP packets, very small in size, very high in frequency. Broadcast traffic, small UDP packets, very high in frequency. The only difference that I would call out, esports broadcast is a little bit more lenient with latency, but jitter and packet loss that ruin the experience for both. So in our path to build the ideal network for gaming, we also build the ideal network for broadcast. So as James said, we are a truly global production. This is all of our studios, and they are all connected to our global backbone. With this backbone, we are able to produce shows basically everywhere. And in 2019, we were able to even produce shows in China where we don't have a presence right now, and we are able to onboard them on our backbone. So I'm going to hand it back to James, that is going to talk about like what is the next generation that we have on esports.
These guys when we say, we're standing on the shoulders of giants at Riot Esports, hopefully this is a kind of a taste. And it's not just the network. There's so many different areas of technology that are layers that enable engineering at Riot, game development, esports, and the like to produce for players at a global scale. And as you can see, having presence across the world, having studios across the world, and the ability to create and share content started to really get our thought processes going. So kind of takes us to 2022. All of the stuff you see so far was built for one game. It was built for League of Legends. But Riot has got a lot of products now that have come out over the last couple of years. And some of them have turned into esports. I know from some of the other Rioters that are here, when Valorant was in early testing and we got access to play it in some of our offices within the esports team, we were saying, oh God, oh no, this is really good. They're going to want to make an esport out of this, aren't they? And that got us thinking, okay, what happens when you need to literally double everything we do? Now we're doing esports and Valorant. And that kind of leads us into more games, is more events, more competitions, and we've got to bring it all to life. And we're kind of like realizing we've reached the limits of what we can do with our current production model and our current production capacity, which leads us into thinking about how do we change it up. And so we're settling now on a model where we're bringing a lot more of the production capacity centrally. We're trying to build larger central facilities that are able to solve technology problems for all of Riot's studios in one place and give them access to create content at a high quality. Additionally, we want to build this across the world because building one giant facility in the middle of the US or in the middle of Europe will lead us to a problem where we have different challenges to distribute content equally across the globe. And also for our operations team. No one wants to come in the middle of the night to work a show in China when they're in Europe, but that's what we've currently been having to do. By building facilities strategically located around the world, sharing content over Riot Direct, we're able to start to move towards a world where our operations team can simply finish at 5 or 6 o'clock, hand a production in progress off to the next facility, and go home and be with their families. And that's the kind of thing that we're really trying to strive to achieve here. So we thought, if we could pivot our entire production to AWS in 11 days, what could we actually accomplish for our fans together? And that's really where we started to lead into the AWS partnership. So powered by AWS and Riot Direct, we've started to build the backbone of the next generation of Riot esports. And this is not like a next year problem as well. This is us trying to think, okay, how do we solve for the next 10 years? How do we put Riot in a place where wherever the technology marketplace goes, we will be able to go with it? So we've built things a bit differently. We've really thought about scaling. We're really thinking about how can we push the boundaries. Very few companies have the opportunity of being able to share content in the way Riot does, and that's leading us to kind of look at ways we can break the rules. Move away from some of the methods that are inherent to traditional broadcasts of the last 20, 30, 40 years, and start to think about how we can distribute things around the world. And so this is all kind of in service of one thing, which is our fans. And what I'm going to share with you now is a cool little preview. This is what we shared with Riot earlier this year to introduce our new production project to our internal Rioters, and I can share it with you now. So please enjoy.
Imagine a world where esports matches are always live, and the competition never ends. Introducing Project Stryker. A network of 3 Riot remote broadcast centers being constructed strategically around the world. First stop, Dublin, Ireland. In less than 6 months, Riot transformed a 50,000 square foot former nightclub into a state-of-the-art remote broadcast center designed for one purpose: bringing joy to esports fans no matter where they live, how they watch, or what language they speak. To see Stryker in action, let's head to show day at one of our regional leagues in Brazil, CB LOL, and follow the life cycle of a live event. It all starts here, our live competitions, where legends are born and the top gamers on the planet face off in epic and unforgettable battles. Capture the excitement of the competition through our broadcast to share live with billions of fans across the globe. To make this happen, the equipment on site is connected to our mobile contribution kit. It's a game changer. Advanced encoders and decoders process the feeds and send them over 10,000 kilometers in a fraction of a second. Riot Direct carries the feeds the entire way, ensuring they arrive at the nearest esports data center where they are then handed off to Riot's first Stryker production facility in Dublin.
Here in Dublin, we have the ability to create, manage, and broadcast esports content. Signals arrive in real time, and their very first stop is the top.
The TOC, or Technical Operations Center, is where video and audio connections are managed. Feeds from anywhere in the world travel thousands of miles in about a tenth of a second, or the time it takes to blink your eye, all thanks to the speed of Riot Direct. Our QC team identifies problems with audio and video feeds as early as possible and prepares everything for handoff to production. Once everything is ready, the TOC operator passes the signals to one of Stryker's production control rooms. For today's event in Brazil, for example, they'll be using a production control room right here in Dublin. The incoming feeds are routed here to PCRD, where they are used to create today's show. Now begins a masterclass in global collaboration. Brazil chose to throw this production to Stryker because their control rooms are already booked for other local esports content. But this show is actually being produced in 5 different languages simultaneously. That's part of Stryker's magic. Our primary Portuguese-speaking casters can stay in Sao Paulo, but the alternate language casters cast the show from anywhere, using private feeds generated by Stryker. Our audio control room manages those remote casters. This ACR is where we combine audio sources to produce our broadcasts. We use powerful audio consoles to mix the event's raw audio sources together, along with the multiple language tracks to create our final show mixes, all done live. For this show, we're creating 5 simultaneous language versions using caster audio feeds from around the world. Now, creating 5 renditions simultaneously would normally be very challenging, but through automation, we're able to combine any number of audio, video, and graphics sources seamlessly.
Here at Project Stryker, we can easily create all the localized elements needed for these 5 languages. Once complete, the signals are ready for our viewers. At that point, the team at the top do one final check, and all 5 feeds get sent to players around the world. Behind the scenes, we can even share our multi-view screens with the production team back in Sao Paulo. This way, their local producer can collaborate on all the different versions of their event. The completed shows and highlights are automatically uploaded to Riot Esports' new Global Content Vault. This is Project Stryker. We are building the foundation for the next decade of Riot Esports.
Dublin is just the first step on our journey. As more Stryker facilities come online in the US and APAC, we'll create global follow-the-sun coverage. Riot Esports' focus has never wavered, to bring joy to billions of fans around the world.
Thank you. Yes, so that's pretty cool, and we're super excited to finally gotten this thing built. A number of us ended up spending an extended stay in Ireland at the end of last year and working for about 6 months through the construction and integration and everything. And as you can see, it looks pretty awesome. But more importantly, it's functional, and that's a really cool thing. So where we get to now, the kind of the remaining few minutes of this talk, I want to just talk a little bit about what powers it, because as you can see, we really have been on quite a journey through Riot, through esports for the kind of the first decade, and now we're entering the second, and we have a lot of lessons that we've incorporated into this. And so the three key pieces that are powering Stryker really are the broadcast production itself, the ability to transmit content anywhere in the world using Riot Direct, and of course the ability to get resources on Amazon fully integrated. So just a quick look at one of these control rooms that they showed in the video. One of the key things that we wanted to do when we first built this is to solve the problem of remote, to solve the problem of having a remote production work. And so all of the control rooms in Project Stryker are actually remote control rooms, even though they're built inside the facility. We've actually deliberately disconnected them by wide area network from the equipment that powers them, which allows us to now be forced to solve the remote production problems right at the start. What that means is that we're by design creating control rooms that can control Riot's production resources, whether they're in the same city or whether they're somewhere else in the world. And that allows us to now do things like look at throwing productions through different parts of Riot. So the core architecture concept is having live events and permanent regional studios where the content actually is created. So that's the events on stage, the games happening, regional leagues, live events, finals, etc. Everything gets connected into Riot Direct at the nearest point of presence. And as Mauricio said, there's over 50 points of presence around the world. So we actually can truly go globally with this. And then at the other side of it, we have the physical data centers, which contain some of Stryker's gear. And that's where we have traditional broadcast appliances. Not everything is yet able to be moved into the cloud, but we're able to get our signals into there and start to aggregate them and mix them together. And at the same time, we also have AWS regions connected to Stryker. So what that means is that effectively, when you look at this control room, all of the resources that you see in it can be in any of those locations. They could be in a data center that's owned by Riot, or they could be in Amazon. And where we're going to is a place where we're able to choose, not at an entire production level, is this production in the cloud or is this production not in the cloud? We could actually take the different elements, the different machines that go into making a production and start to split them out by whichever service is most appropriate to run in the cloud or on-premise at the time. Also, it means that if we start to run into scaling problems, we can immediately start to look to the cloud to boost any physical infrastructure that we have. You can see here actually, even down to the workstations that operators use, they're not actually PCs, they're Zero clients, and all of the operators are actually using Amazon workspaces to do their job. It means that an operator can physically move from one control room to another, and all of their stuff just follows them along as they move. We don't need to kind of worry about having multiple PCs and user profiles that move around and all of that. All of that stuff that broadcasters don't like to think about. So putting all of this together and kind of looking at what Stryker can do, the power of Riot Direct, we had our first show coming together. And this is where we were all personally quite terrified, because we put so much innovation into this, and we kind of put everything on the line and said, okay, it's time for us to do our first show with this new project. And so we picked what was going to be a nice, let's say, comfortable event to try it out in. We picked a show that was in Madrid, Spain, which is very well connected on Riot Direct. There's actually a POP in Madrid. And we were producing out of Dublin. So we thought that's nice and easy. We can just hop through Europe. There's lots of paths, and there's low risk. 3 weeks before the show, many of the teams that were supposed to compete in the event ran into visa problems, and they couldn't come to Spain anymore. And so the production teams at Riot kind of scrambled to find a new location that they could get their teams to, and the event ended up in Singapore. If you recall the Riot Direct map, Singapore is completely at the other end of Riot Direct from Dublin. And so we ended up trying to, conceptually it was quite simple. We would just take our contribution kit, where we aggregate all of the signals on site and transmit them over Riot Direct, and take it from Madrid to Singapore and turn it on. But the challenge there is that all of this video transmission uses quite a lot of bandwidth, and we're actually budgeting about 7 to 8 gigabits per second of content to be transmitted over Riot Direct. And so suddenly we had to transmit that from Singapore to Dublin and back again to make the show. And so what we've got here is a video that's just showing, there's no audio in this, so don't worry about it. The video is showing the production latency as filmed on the ground in Singapore. And so you can see in the backdrop the stage. That's the live stage showing some animated graphics. And the monitor in the front is showing the return feed that's coming from Dublin. So what's happening here is that a camera or a set of cameras on stage is actually capturing that content. It's getting encoded into a protocol called JPEG XS, which is a next generation video transmission protocol. It's transmitted across the Pacific, across the continental US, across the Atlantic, into Dublin. It gets run through Dublin's data center, produced by the team in the TOC in Dublin, and then transmitted back across the Atlantic, across the continental states, and across the Pacific to Singapore. And as was alluded to in our preview video to Riot, it happens in a fraction of a second, and we're really, really happy to say that we were actually able to manage to do it. And so it was, a fraction of a second to get that signal all the way around the world. And what that actually enabled that production to do was the teams traveling to Spain wasn't the only problem. Some of the production team couldn't travel to Singapore. And because we had another studio in Los Angeles, also in Riot Direct, we were able to give the producers in LA the ability to tap straight into the show. And in real time, we had a director calling the camera shots. So take camera 1, take camera 2, and the person pushing the button was in Dublin. And they were able to completely execute their show flawlessly with people spread all over the world. So it's a really good way of kind of proving out that the idea works. So yes, terrifying to start with, and very, very proud to see it come together and work the way it did. So zooming in a little bit more on the infrastructure and how we actually get into Amazon. This is obviously reInvent. This is the kind of the concept that we're going for now with how we build Stryker into the future. We've got a number of services that run on physical appliances in our data centers. And piece by piece, we're able to move them into kind of bespoke VPCs that we spin up as are appropriate. And so we've got things like a VPC for our workspace clients to live in. We've got a VPC for media peering. We've got cloud production, if you recall the earliest slide about March 2020 and remote production. And so we can start to kind of piece by piece bring some of these services across where appropriate, and we can use these in the cloud. And so it's a really exciting time. Not everything is ready to be moved, but we're able to now kind of interact with vendors who also want to be on the cutting edge of this industry and start to try things. And the underpinning infrastructure is allowing us to just be completely flexible with how we approach these problems. So the final event that we did, which was only a couple of years ago, we run a Valorant championship for female gamers, and that was run out of Berlin. We were able to kind of put a lot of this infrastructure to use. We had our Elemental servers running on site. We had EC2 instances doing a lot of the distribution work. We had workspaces providing all of the operators. We had also our global content vault, which is probably another entire talk worth of information, which is where we keep all of our video content for Riot to use, and that's all on S3. And then finally, Media Live, which is the cloud version of the Elemental encoding server. So we were able to transmit, a couple of hundred terabytes of JPEG XS content directly into Amazon. That was probably one of the, in my opinion, coolest use cases we got, because we were able to start to move away from having an entire class of encoding device used by us. So this is, we're getting to the end here, don't worry. This is the JPEG XS encoder is the last physical appliance that Riot actually used in this workflow. And this is how we were able to get our transmission signals out to client. So just a recap, JPEG XS is a protocol that encodes in a fraction of a second. It runs a couple of hundred megabits per second, so it is quite hefty. You wouldn't want to transmit it across the world unless you have something like Riot Direct. And we're able to get that into Amazon Media Connect. It gets converted and run into Media Live and encoded into something that we can then transmit to partners, to Twitch, to YouTube, to any platform that we need to. And this is something that we're able to now kind of take and use the same tools that we use to send video on and off Riot Direct. We now no longer need to worry about the second set of encoding that delivers that content on to our partners. We can actually offload that into Amazon, and we don't need to actually kind of think. We can spin it up and down as we need it, and it will change and grow as our needs do. So, finishing up, kind of what do we take away with? We've been working obviously at Riot to try and build a platform that we can kind of launch the next generation of Riot's esports on. We're trying to put ourselves in a place where no matter what direction our technology options go, we're able to tap into them. And that's done at a kind of service level rather than at a production level. And we're kind of positioning ourselves to go as fast as our vendors can. So this is where we're looking to the market now to say, okay, over the next few years, what are the cool, exciting technologies and toys we can start to use that will enable us to create scalable productions and to bring in different production elements into our shows so that we can then provide back into the rest of Riot and provide a seamless experience for all of our regions. And obviously, that's the way we can get to the viewers all around the world in all of the languages, is just to simply create these tools to create content for Riot. So that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.